She had the life, money, family, and freedom.
From the outside, it was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But on the inside, it was unsettling. And I felt so guilty about that.
So when her inner world unraveled,
I suffered this massive panic attack, and it stopped me in my tracks.
She went searching for answers.
At our core, really, that's what we're looking for, right? Is how to feel loved, how to feel good, how to belong.
Now Marta Hobbs is sharing the inner work that transformed her life and gave her a purpose beyond her pain.
I just want us to remove the facade and talk about what's on our hearts.
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Myers. This is Intentional Living with Courtney Myers. Hi, Marta. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Myers. I'm so happy that we get to meet and have this conversation today.
Hi, Courtney. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our chat.
I am too, because you have such a rich and I'll even say storied history. You come from communist Poland, I think is where I read, and you immigrated to the US. So you got to kind of experience living the American dream, building this massive company. And I know from what I've read is you kind of had like this moment where it's like, you reached it. You reached the epitome of like what we would consider success or the American dream. And then you just weren't fulfilled. And that's kind of the point of this podcast is, we can do everything in our power to make it, find success, do what the outside world tells us we're supposed to do. But so often I feel like we are so disconnected from who we truly are inside that it doesn't matter what we do, we don't find that fulfillment. And I think you're just such a great example of how you have to really step inside to truly find what lights you up in life. And so I'm really excited to talk to you and hear your whole story. And I think that's where we should start. Kind of give me your background, give me your story, and let's see where this conversation takes us.
Sounds great. I was 39 when I reached what I would consider to be, the peak of my career and the height of my success as defined by the outside world, right? Especially as a foreigner. So I did grow up in Poland under communism. My family and I fled for safety. Arriving in the U.S., not speaking a word of English, and not, this was in the 80s, so not having a reference. There was no internet in terms of what to expect. I was told we're going there for freedom. And what does freedom look like to, a 12, 13-year-old? Like, you want friends and you want acceptance and you want to be, recognized, validated, loved by your peers. Mm-hmm. And here I was, a complete foreigner standing on the outside looking in. And I think that was so painful that for me, not understanding it at the time, but now knowing, looking back, this is sort of where the pursuit started, right? There was the pain was so deep and the loneliness was so severe. And then the darkness that came with it that I said, this is unacceptable. And how did I cope with it? And that's what I call the becoming, right? And so I developed the skill of, assessing sort of like, what game are we playing here? Like, what's the battlefield? And what do I need to do to survive? Your typical survival story. Like, how do I get in there? How do I make this work? And so I became almost like a chameleon. And it was a beautiful thing that served me at the time and still serves me sometimes today. But in that, watching what everyone around me was doing and copying it and then actually competing to do it quicker and better, it kind of became my MO, right? Like, that's how I operated in the world. It's who I was. I was this warrior. I was this fighter. I was this tough girl that I could do anything. And, I can do anything is a beautiful belief, but not when it's fueled by old pain and trauma and hurt. And so, I put myself through school. I learned the language. I mastered the culture. I got married. I had 2 beautiful children. And my husband and I started a company. And this was life, this constant, what's everyone doing? How are they doing it? How can I do it better? Chasing, achieving, succeeding, because that's what got me validation. That's what felt like love to me, right? And at our core, really, that's what we're looking for, right? Is how to feel loved, how to feel good, how to belong. And it worked for a long time, and it brought me to some beautiful places in my career and in my life. Until at 39, we had just moved to Paris, France, which was a dream of mine. We sold our company, and finding myself again the foreigner, but now losing that title of entrepreneur, COO, founder, and also, not working created a lot more space in my calendar. So things started to move slightly slower. So like that race that I had been calling life had significantly slowed down. And slowly, my body started to completely freak out because this way of functioning was shocking. Like, well, I'm the one that's constantly running, constantly juggling 17 things at the same time, and controlling chaos, right? Like, I'm a great consultant for those things. I can come in and tell you what the problem is and how to fix it. Like, it's that was just who I was. My work was who I was. How I performed in all the roles in life was the identity. And I was so over-identified with all the masks that I wore, not understanding at the time that it was at that moment at 12 years old that I decided that who I was on the inside was just not good enough. That it had to be masked, that it had to be repressed. So the only way for me to find acceptance was to kind of erase any foreignness, right? Like erase anything that made me different from others. And so, but in doing that, I completely disconnected from my true essence, who I was at the core of my being. So of course, when the external world tells me you've made it, like there you are, you're 39, you're financially secure for the rest of your life, you're retired, wow, the company, look at your family, look at your life, like, and from the outside it was perfect. Mm-hmm. But on the inside it was unsettling, and I felt so guilty about that. I felt such shame over the fact, and everyone's like, you must be like so happy. And there was something that was missing, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And so I stayed busy. I volunteered. I mommed real hard. I set up a new place in Paris. Like, I figured out how to learn the language. And then about a year later, I suffered this massive panic attack. And at the time, we weren't talking about that so openly. Mm-hmm. We were not discussing it. We were not talking about mental health. This was a decade ago. And I for sure thought it was a heart attack, that it was dying. My days were limited. I was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. Depression came. It was the 6 to 9 months of daily panic attacks, which each time I thought was, this is it. This is the moment. This is where my life ends. And it was just, I found myself this brave, strong, courageous warrior woman that I became in the space of complete lostness, darkness, fear, and terror, and with no guidance really as to what was happening. I wasn't surrounded by people that were talking about, hey, how about the inner life? How about the soul? And like and so I set out on this journey really to help myself. It wasn't anything honorable or extraordinary at the time. I just wanted to feel better. I was suffering profoundly, and I felt like it was impacting my family and my marriage and just my life. And that was the moment that my life completely shifted, and the focus became, well, who am I? What is this life that I'm living about? Like it, and that sent me, what now we can say, looking back on the journey inward, and it was really a search for myself.
It was almost like your old life it was almost like you were saying goodbye to your old life. Like it was a death in a sense that of your old life. You might not have been truly dying, like you said, by those anxiety attacks, but it mirrors it. It sounds like it was very similar to something like that. And then you had to be reborn. So how did you end up going within? Like, what led you down this path, and how did you start to learn who you were?
Yeah. It was like a death, and I think I've had few more since then, but now I understand that it makes it a little bit more, still not comfortable, but now I trust that, after death comes rebirth. But at the time, I just was, this is where my I can do anything really served me, because I just was so desperate for healing and for finding the root cause of what was happening that I was willing to try anything. And that included going to church. That included taking antidepressants. That included starting therapy for the first time in my life. And I thought therapy was for crazy people, everything I started to do, my therapist was like, gosh, you hold so much tension in your body. Let's breathe. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we're breathing all the time. But, so breath work became a thing. Someone told me to go to yoga. Then all those things were so uncomfortable at the time. And, I always say the beginning of my inner journey, I went kicking and screaming because I didn't want to do any of it. I just wanted to come back to normal, right? Like, we just want to return, because it's such a scary thing to let go of who we think we are. And that's what feels like dying. And I needed to do that. I needed to release any ideas of who I thought I was and how my life was supposed to look like. And because all of that was defined by my culture, my family, my parents, the society, church, whatever, your friends, everything you learned in school. And, I just started questioning everything. And I really started by looking at my childhood and looking at, my gosh, how did this thing I call me, my personality, how did it develop? Where did it come from? And I started to see that a lot of the ways that I had been functioning up until then, while they served me very well while I was a child, became almost like this cage that I had put myself in. They were very limiting, and they were preventing me from further expansion and growth and change. And then I just started reading everything. And so it really was, I felt like I was on a quest, and it was this beautiful journey. And one thing just led me to another, and so I really believe that, God or the divine or the universe, whatever your term for that is, was placing these little gems along this painful journey, and it was like a treasure hunt, and so one book would lead me to another, or I would find a teacher, or I would find an incredible podcast. And so I just started really learning about how we developed as children, as human beings, how the mind works, how you can change it with, neuroplasticity, learning about attachment, how we develop our, attachment styles with our primary caretakers. And then that's how we show up in every relationship in life, how we have patterns that we're constantly stuck in. And like, all this stuff was not bad news. Oh my God, I'm so screwed up. All of this was like, oh my God. And then also, why didn't anybody tell me about this? Mm-hmm. And, and that's sort of my mission now, because I felt so alone with it. Mm-hmm. I now want to guide people. So, I encounter it's women that tend to find me in this space that are like, who am I if I'm not mom? Mm-hmm. If I'm not my job? If I'm not a spouse to my partner? If I'm, who's underneath all that? And so the journey to who am I started with, well, who am I not anymore? So it's before I found myself, I needed to unbecome. So it's like shedding all the layers of what really was preventing me to see the truth of who I am. And that was all the roles and jobs that I've taken on as a woman. All important. I think motherhood is one of my most important and most beloved roles, but who is that being underneath that? And that is a scary journey, because you enter the darkness and you enter the unknown and you enter your old pain. And most people don't want to go there. And I certainly didn't. But life just gave me no choice. Like the panic attacks, like it was such a sign from my body. Now I know, and the anxiety of this is not sustainable. And interestingly, my grandmother died of a stroke at 46, 47. And I now truly believe that had I not done the inner work, like that's where I was heading, because the pressure I was living under was just toxic and immense. Yeah.
Well, I think that is one of the key things. I mean, so many people have to go through something big to take that journey, to figure out who they are becoming or where they really are from within. And if you're not, I mean, it can show up in the form of a near-death experience. It can show up in the loss of a loved one. It can show up in grief, or it can show up in just your body. Like you start to have symptoms like stomach aches or headaches or migraines or anxiety. I've dealt with all of that. And it's that going in and you just like, it's that seeking for answers and looking for normality, because that is something that you said that I struggled with for a bit, is like not wanting to totally step into this like God, universe space, because I didn't grow up with that so much. And just this wanting to feel like, no, but this is a normal thing. And it's not as talked about, I think it's talked about more and it's embraced more, the more of us normal people stepping into this role. But I think we need to embrace that idea that like, it is normal. And we do tend to hide behind all these different facets of self. Even like you said, going to therapy. I mean, I went to therapy for years and I've been very open about it, because I think we need to remove that stigma if we want to truly find that peace within ourselves, because none of us can find peace if we don't really understand who we are. And I think you're right. As women, we really, really hold on to these other roles. And I know I did as a child, and you don't want to disappoint people and you don't want to change. But if you're not changing, you're not growing and you're not evolving in what we're here for. So what does that look like for you now? Like what kind of fulfillment have you found now that you finally were able to go within?
It's a beautiful question. And I think of it as being the guide that I wish I had at the time when all this started for me. And so being that for other women. And oftentimes, as I like to say, the soul comes knocking, or maybe in the beginning, it's soft and tender whispers, invitations of, hey, maybe, and we ignore it, right? We ignore it. And so like you said, the soul sometimes takes drastic measures to get our attention. And I really, like you said, I want to normalize this. And I'm having this conversation so often lately that spirituality is like this dirty word. And, because we each have our own ideas to what it means. To a lot of people, it's religion and church and that other people think it's witches and woo woo and whatever, like granola crunching yogi and like none of that, like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And I just really believe that we are mind, body, and soul as human beings. And the longer we repress the soul part of who we are, the more we will suffer. I really believe it's the cause for so much of what we now call mental illness. It's just pure disconnection from self. And when you're disconnected from self, you don't have the ability to truly and deeply connect with others. And you're certainly not connecting with, some higher force that it's like orchestrating this whole thing we call life and the planet and the universe and all that. And then you feel so alone. Not just alone from other people, but in this space of, oh my God, it's all up to me. I have to figure it out. I have to fight for, and that is impossible, first of all, but also extremely, extremely isolating. And so we struggle. So we feel alone. And I just want to make the conversation normal when we say, hey, look, a big part of who you are is a spirit. And I want that to be, I want the breakdown process that I went through to just be a normal thing. Yeah, that happens. And you know what? It's going to happen several times in your life because we're so desperately seeking to stay comfortable, feeling good, in high vibes, good vibes only, that when anything uncomfortable comes, we try to push it away and avoid it. But change is our natural state of being. And it's such a beautiful part of who we are, the evolution and, the expansion. But we just don't know how to be in that space, how to let go, especially, like we cling to the illusion of safety, same old. And then we wonder why things don't improve. We keep ourselves stuck by repeating our patterns, by saying, this is just who I am. This is just how I am. And so my invitation is just, it's normal for us to go through seasons. It's normal for us to want other things. It's normal for us to change our minds. It's normal for one day to want to build an empire with your career and the next day feel totally lazy and not want to get out of it. Like, all of it is normal. And at the same time, we shouldn't just want to feel good all the time. Sadness and grief and loneliness are also part of the human experience. And so I just want us to remove the facade. How are you? Fine. How are you? Fine. And talk about what's on our hearts. And for that to be the normal way we relate to one another, by sharing our pain.
But yeah, coming back to that whole concept of that normalcy and to continue on, even that whole concept of change, I think we are so deathly afraid of what change means, whether that's for ourselves, for our own growth, or even for the people in our world. It's a lot of times I've heard it described as, the crab in the bucket. I've had a lot of experience of people talking about this. Is like, when you set out to change or find something different, it's almost like a death also to the people surrounding you. It's like, it's hard to change when others in your life aren't wanting you to change. So how do you really it takes courage. It takes courage to take this journey. It takes courage to stand on your own. And it takes courage to face all those feelings and sit in those emotions and try and understand what that means, as opposed to just staying in, like you said, the high vibes or everything is great. So how do we go there? How do we find that courage to really just say, no, I need to grow. And if you're not on this journey with me, it's okay. But don't hold me back, type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with, it's such a great topic. It starts with deciding that you will be the one who will be the cycle breaker. So it does take courage. And at the same time, there needs to be softness and compassion, knowing that when you change who you are, it completely affects everyone in your circle. So while you're kind of rocking your own identity, you're also rocking theirs. Because in order for them, the way you show up in their relationship with others, they need you to be this way, because then they know who they are. Right. This is how the dance works. You help them know who they are. The minute you change, you're rocking their ground a little bit. You're pulling that carpet from under them, and it's very destabilizing. And so, of course, initially, the reactions are negative. I remember when I first started putting up boundaries, when I started learning what a boundary is. I thought, as a mom, as a woman, as a caretaker, I just was supposed to, overpour into others.
Yes.
It's a beautiful intention, but the one person I wasn't looking after was myself. And so I was resentful and exhausted. But everybody else, it served them that I wasn't looking after myself, because I was so focused on them. They were my world. And so when I started to say, no, I can't help you with that right now. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to take that on. I need time by myself. I need to go away for a weekend. It was shocking. And so I think number one is deciding that you want something different, that you are worthy of more for yourself. And then an open communication with everyone that's in your life in terms of what your why is. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm not doing this because I love you, because I don't love you. I'm doing this because here's what I'm learning. And making that a normal thing. I know for my kids, my kids at the time, where my son was 12 and my daughter was 17, and, their mom, as they knew it, I carried everything and everyone on my shoulders, and suddenly I was on the couch, and it was scary, right? For them, because the family at that age, it defines who they are as people. And so it took a while. In the beginning, I wanted to shield and protect them, but then I just started to talk about them, that this is what I'm experiencing. And where's joy? How do I play? I remember people would be like, what makes you happy? And every answer was, oh, when my kids play, and oh, when we're together as a family. But it was completely disconnected to, the little girl in me who wanted to play or dance or sing or swing on the swings. And so it's, again, normalizing that change is a completely natural state of who we are and how exciting the journey is. But the initial change is scary because we never want to let go. Mm-hmm. It is an earth-shattering experience when you're like, oh my God, if this is not who I am, mm-hmm. if the world doesn't function the way I had thought through this lens, then what? And you have to be okay with not knowing, which is a really scary place to be, because we want safety, we want predictability. But when we stay in that space, nothing new ever happens. And so I think that's why it needs to get so bad that you're like, I want that I don't know, because it's got to be better than what I'm experiencing right now. And sometimes that's what it takes. And so you're like, all right, I guess I'm willing to go to that scary place mm-hmm. because this is just too painful.
And I think that's where your faith comes in. You're like, there has to be something different. There has to be something more, because stepping into that unknown, I mean, I hear you on so many levels. Excuse me. I am a mom. I have young kids. I had a big career before I had kids. I got married later in life, had my kids later. So it was like a loss of that identity. And now mm-hmm. taking on the mom identity that I thought I always wanted. And it's like, well, that's not fulfilling enough. And it's like trying to find yourself in this and then understanding that there's something more and there's something bigger. And I've always found that I'm I'm a person that wants to control the outcome of everything. So like you said, going into that change and going into that unknown takes a lot. But at a certain point, something gives and you're just like, I gotta go there, because you need to find whatever that is. And I think that's what we're all here to experience in a way. But I think this topic keeps coming up more and more too, is going back to that inner child that you need to serve and you need to talk to. Like, what makes you happy? That question, I've talked to so many people about that when it comes to whether therapy or life coaching or whatever. What makes you happy? And no one can really answer that very easily unless I go back to, well, when I was a child, this made me happy. Or when I did this made me happy. Which leads me to think that there's a reason why we're all talking about healing our inner child these days. Because that's when we found that happiness, right?
And I have a quote on my desk that says, when did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? When did you stop seeking silence? When did you stop being enchanted by life? Mm-hmm. That's when you lost your connection to self. And when's the last time you did all those things? When you were that little girl with mm-hmm. big dreams and, like before the world told you that you were too much or not enough. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's, I call it like a soul retrieval journey, almost like you go back to that little girl. I mean, I remember when I first started doing healing work and one of my mentors was like, well, what brings you joy? And she would not allow me to answer it by what other people are doing. No, you, like, what brings you joy? And I was so sad that I didn't know, that I really, really had to think about it. So it started with little things like, oh my gosh, I think I like flowers. And so I started with just having a bouquet of fresh flowers at home. And then I remembered, oh, I love the beach. Like when I lived in Poland, under oppression and the grayness of what communism is, every summer we would go to Greece and my skin would get tan and my hair would get lighter and I would run. And I just remember, that's how I got back in touch with this wild and free spirit that was still in me. And how sad that she was so silenced by, with my desire to people please and follow mm-hmm. rules, because that's what we're told when we're little, to be good girls. Mm-hmm. And so it was coming back in touch and with her. And, my therapist would be like, okay, today I want you to take your little girl, go on a date. What would she like to do? And it was like, she wants to go swing on a swing. And there I was in my early 40s, going on a freaking swing in the park. And the rush of energy that moved through me, like I could feel like that little girl, like, and can I swing higher? And can I swing higher? Mm-hmm. And it was reconnecting in that sense. And, it is, we are so, and controlling, at the root of that is fear.
Mm-hmm.
You're afraid. And that drives so many of us, especially when we become moms, and we just want to keep our kids safe. And it's just about remembering how to play. Mm-hmm. And God, we lose connection with that because we get so focused on others. So it's that coming back in, which is so unnatural because we've normalized, we're the caretakers, we pour into others, pouring from an empty cup, right? And so there's exhaustion and resentment. So it's just like, I just remind women, while you're pouring into others, like, who's looking after you? And why are they not looking after you? Because this is what we've taught our families. Oh, no, I'm good. I don't need anything. I'm fine.
Yeah.
And can we soften, and can we accept? Can we receive? Can we ask for help first? But then can we receive it? And that's so hard. That's so hard. But we can do hard things. So why don't we start doing those kind of hard things instead of the hard things that we've been doing, seeking validation externally? Like, that's got to end.
Why do you think it's so hard for us to receive? Because as you're saying this, I'm just thinking about myself, and I have a really hard time receiving help. Even my husband will come to me and be like, I know you have a lot on your plate. How can I help you? And then it's like he's offering and I'm just drawing a blank. Like, yeah. I don't know. Like, why do we have such a hard time, like, allowing?
I think, first of all, it's what's modeled for you, right? Like, oh, I can't be, that's weakness to be too dependent on someone. So, like, it first, like, it's weakness. Second of all, I really think, like, okay, I'll take it, but I need it to be this way, right? Like, he's going to put away the groceries. You're like, well, why should I let him put away the groceries? But then I'm going to take an hour reorganizing the groceries.
Yeah.
Can you just let that go? So can we let that go? This, like, we need for things to be in this perfect order according to the rules we have up here. The fridge needs to look this way. The dishes need to be put away this way. The laundry needs to, whatever the things are, right? Like, it doesn't all have to be house related. Mm-hmm. I need external things to be this way in order for me to be okay, because I'm not okay in here. So if I can, like you said in the beginning, if I can come back to my own inner peace, mm-hmm. to my own love for myself, and I am steady and grounded in who I am, and that is love itself, then do I really care about what the fridge looks like? Do I really, is the fact that, the black socks got washed with white socks, is that really going to ruin my day? Mm-hmm. No, because it's an irrelevant small thing, right? Because I know that there's a bigger thing that's at play here. And my purpose isn't to control my husband and my children. My purpose is to learn how to love myself so that I can love them from a space of not needing them to be a certain way and do things a certain way, but loving them for who they are. So then they too feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable, even if they screw up, that they're not going to get in trouble and get their heads cut off by mom. But we screw. And then everyone feels safe enough to come as they truly are. And then they feel seen, because so often we need our kids to be this way. Like, I learned this with my kids when things started to shift. I remembered reading somewhere, when your son or daughter walks in the room, does your face light up because you see them? Or are you like tucking your shirt, your shoes are dirty? And it stopped me in my tracks because your hands are dirty. Or like, what am I saying to them? I only love you if you come not messy. And I was, because in my head, I needed them to be that way, for me to be like, now you're lovable. And that's horrible. But that's how I was taught to love when I was little. So I started to say, oh my God, if this isn't love, taking care of my kids, what I perceived I was doing, teaching them to be responsible, if that's not what love is, then what is it? And I had to go find that too, And so now it's all again in here. Like, can love just be this energetic feeling that I am feeling for myself first, that then I give it to others around me, and it's without doing anything for them, just by being who I am, they feel my love. And then it just becomes a safe space for everybody to be who they are. And then you're seen, and then you're heard, and then you're loved, which is something we're all seeking, but yet we hide because it's never safe to come open-hearted because we might get hurt. So then it just shifted my world where it was like, wow, I'm still needing for things to be okay out there so I can feel okay. And here, that's reverse. What can I find in here that then the outside world, it is what it is, but there's love in my heart.
I mean, that's so profound. Just, I mean, coming back to the whole concept of love, because even when you're talking about that, I know for me, I'm learning to love myself too, because I grew up as, like you said, a performer. Look at me. Look what I accomplished in my mind. And I'm not even putting that blame on anyone else in my life. In my mind, that is what I equated love to be. You know, I get straight A's. I'm the editor of the paper. I'm the head cheerleader. I performed here. Whatever it was, like that to me equaled you're amazing and you get love in that way. And we actually are experiencing that with my daughter now. I'm starting to already see it, and she's about to be 4. And I'm really trying to reverse course because I don't want her to have to search in her 40s the way I am of how to really love myself. I mean, even this last couple of days, we've been trying to teach her how to ride her little bike, her balance bike. And, you know, I'm giving her praise as she's doing it, but I'm also trying to be like, I'm so happy you're showing up and you're putting in the work, you know, trying not to be like, you did it. And even she went up to my husband and said to him, Daddy, are you proud of me? I did it. And he's like, you know, he is hyper aware of like how I approach everything by my achievement. So he's really trying hard. He almost like doesn't want to tell her he's proud of her because he doesn't want her to think that that's how you get his love. Yeah. He's just like, I'm proud of you for doing this, honey. I'm proud of you no matter what, you know, being really hyper aware of that. Like you don't have to perform. But I mean, there's even like you said with like your fridge being the right way, there's industries built around control. I mean, there's industries built about keeping everything just such a way, multi-billion-dollar industries. Like why, how do we go there? Like, how do we let go of that fear and really just accept that love, let go of that control? Like you said, fear, control it comes from fear.
Yeah. I think by having conversations like this, I mean, and I think by recognizing, like for you to recognize that this is how you got love, that needs to happen because, you know, what's the saying? Like you have to, if you don't transform it, you transmit it. So you have to see that that's how you perceived love when you were little so that you can decide, this is not what I want for my little girl.
Right.
And you get to say, this ends with me. And that's what, for me, the big motivator was, I'm going to heal all the trauma that's been constantly passed down generations. And it ends here so that I can be free. You know, why we left Poland for freedom. And I'm like, this is it. It looks different than what my parents thought. Like it's in here. It stops here. So my kids can be free. And I'm not talking from communism. I'm talking about inner freedom, which is, you know, that's the thing. And so I think, is she proud of herself, right? It's teaching her to be like, well, it doesn't matter what daddy thinks. Doesn't really matter what mommy thinks. I mean, sure it does, but like, how do you feel, honey? Right? Are you so proud of yourself? You know, it's so empowering. And it's like teaching her that pride, if it comes from your own heart, like, that's teaching her to like take her power back because we so often give it away to other people, to circumstances, whether or not you get a raise, whether you get X amount of likes on social media, whether you got promoted, how big your house is. Like, what if I am so proud of myself that I don't care what dad thinks. I mean, of course, it's her dad. She's always, but you know what I mean? Like that's the root of pride is in her own little heart. And it's like, it's all about that feeling. So it's like accessing the pride or the love within our own, it's generating it in here for yourself, you know? And then I really have found that the more I find the thing that I am seeking out there, the more I find it in here, love, acceptance, freedom, belonging, then the external world only mirrors what I'm already feeling out here. So now the foreigner girl gets to show up all kinds of places. And because I belong to myself, I belong everywhere, and it took a decade to get there. And so I want to tell women, like, this is possible for anyone who's interested. And look, and why I wrote the book and why I talked about the most painful parts of my life. My husband was addicted to alcohol for, over 20 years of our 27 years of marriage. And I talk about that too, because look at what I have overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do the same thing. Like the details of our pain are different, but our pain is universal. And so is the way to heal it. And that is coming back to what's in your own heart. How can you love yourself first, and healing, and then remembering that connection, who we are at the soul level. I mean, it's all, and then you don't need the external world to validate you, because it's all in here. And so that is my work. And I feel like that is my purpose. It's just to remember who I am so that I can remind others, and to, just be that light for others. When this feels scary and lost, and say, this is normal and it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. I think that's probably some of the best words of advice I got for parenting, just like turning it back, like how does that make you feel? I think that is so empowering, and I am definitely going to use that. But do you also think that search for validation, do you think that's what we're all doing? Do you think we're all searching for that validation? Is that why it's such a big topic right now?
I think it's a search for love. And oftentimes validation feels like love. And if that's what we were taught when we were little. We each have our own filters, right? We each have a different experience that we learned when we're young. But I think that's really what we're searching for deeply, is to connect. It's that, like, do you see me? Do you love me? And I think for a lot of women, it looks like validation, because we had to perform, we had to do, we had to achieve, to get love. That was my case.
Well, but even in that journey and even in that quest, it feels very self-isolating. It feels like sometimes you're the only one that's not getting that validation, or not getting that approval, or not getting, like, whatever, a promotion, the likes, whatever it is. It feels so individual. But the more and more people I talk to, especially the more and more women I talk to, this is a universal concept and a universal problem that I really think we're facing.
Absolutely. That's why I say the details may be different.
Yeah.
But that feeling is universal. And that's why these are the conversations we need to be having, because the minute you share that load with someone else, that heaviness that you're carrying, you feel lighter. I mean, we self-isolate because we think we won't be loved and accepted if we say, that was the case for me. I didn't tell anyone that I was lost and confused, because sometimes when I did, the wrong people said, there are children in Africa that are starving, or you just need to pray harder, or you're so lucky, whatever the things are. And so the world then teaches you, don't share what's on your heart, because people will ridicule you, people will shame you. And so we stopped having these conversations. But let's create safe containers where it's okay to say, my life looks great and I am at a loss. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Because I think so many people can relate to that.
Well, and that's just through, like you said, sharing your pain, sharing your journey, sharing your husband's issues or your children's issues. We curate what we share so much to put up this image or this facade. And I truly believe that when we can share that pain, we can connect. Like I said, like we were talking about earlier before we got on, I'm a storyteller. It's about telling these stories. You don't evoke change. You don't create an impact. You don't connect with people if you're just saying what you're supposed to say, or you're just fitting in the way you're supposed to fit in. It's that vulnerability that is so beautiful. And that's what you say your book is about. Tell me a little bit more about your book, Unraveling.
Yeah, it starts with my first panic attack, and the first opening sentences, I was dying, and I knew it. And so it tells my story of breaking down at that, the wonderful moment of having made it. And then talking about, I really wanted to look at how I became who I thought I was as I was learning myself. So learning about, for example, how I thought I had to do it all. I never trusted to lean on others. Like when I was young, my parents were so busy, and there was Cold War was going on at the time. And so there wasn't a lot of resources for me. So I had to, do everything myself. And so what does that mean then that's when I became her, the warrior, right? Like what, at 3? And then you think this is who you are. And then what immigration, how that affected who I became. Then, marriage, then a career. And then, so all of these were like, and I, if you look at it as chapters, you can see how fragmented that experience is. And of course we're disconnected, because if I am with my parents, I act this way. If I'm with my husband, I act this way. If I'm with my girlfriends, maybe I'm a little bit more relaxed. But we're still there are these right, pieces. And how do we, so then of course it broke because the inner tension was so massive. And so I go through my whole entire life to the point of breaking, making people see like, this is why. And that is not who you truly are. And really it starts with wholeness, and healing is to bring all those parts of yourself back into one. How do we do that? And so then, the last part of the book talks about my healing journey, which at first was still a good girl perfectionism quest to become an acceptable way to fix myself. And then learning, actually, that's not healing, reaching some perfected state. That's still me trying to get validation from the external world. So letting all that go. And then the journey becoming of really getting to know who I was, right? So who my persona was and how that developed, what drove all that. And then deciding, does that still work for me where I am in my life right now? Do I still want to be the fighter and the warrior? No, I'd like to love more deeply. So can I put the sword down? Can I open my heart? Can I soften? So then, how I then decided in each area of my life what I wanted to change, if I wanted to change, and then allowing myself to go to that place of not knowing, that void. You have to face that in order to be able to rebuild. Like rebirth it isn't death and rebirth, right? There's a massive space in between where you're sitting in, I don't know, a liminal space. And that was the most difficult. And so what happened, I take the reader on the journey of my own healing, which then became a beautiful, spiritual awakening, which led me now to my purpose, which is to share this way of living, living out of the space of not what should I do today, what would I love to do today? Like what feels, and like, it's okay to live out of that space,
I've heard that even like, that word should is almost like, I mean, I know it's not 4 letters, but it's almost like a 4-letter word, that's like that's like the death of your spirit. But even what you're saying is that like that quest for perfection, because I can even remember my very first mentor and, I've had different mentors along my journey, especially in the spiritual space is, I remember showing up and I remember her describing me as like that happy dog, like a golden retriever, just willing to please, like panting, and that was that perfection. Cause even stepping into this role of healing and you think you're like, have this great consciousness and this big awareness, you're still trying to be that perfectionist in this space. And that's not what it's about. And I think there's a lot of that in the journey to find self and in the spiritual space. And there's a lot of people, you have to do it this way, or there's, being spiritual is almost like accepting that you're going to be messy.
Yes. And that is a great point. Sitting with discomfort. I think that was my biggest learning in that space, after death, but not yet the new life. How comfortable can I be with the discomfort? And that's also, kind of takes me back to your question on how do we talk about this? A lot of times when I first started to share my struggles, it made the people that I was sharing with so uncomfortable that instead of sitting with me in my suffering, they needed to fix me. And I think for us as women, that is, for me, it was for a long time a hard thing to do. Sit with someone. I just wanted to make them feel better.
Yes.
That's not very helpful. Sometimes we just need to sit with the pain with saying nothing, but our own tension is so, it mirrors to us often what hurts. And so we don't want to go there. And so it's learning to be comfortable with my own discomfort. It's okay for me to be messy. It's okay for me to be needy and whiny and tired and lazy and unmade up, whatever the things are. Like, all of it is acceptable. Not only that, all of it is loved. And then when someone comes to me and says, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that, can I love and accept them in their brokenness without needing to fix them or to manage their symptoms, And I think that's how we create a safe, because storytelling is beautiful, but how do we create a safe space for listening? Because you can, you know what I mean? Oftentimes when we storytell, we trigger other people. Their pain in them is triggered. And then what do? It comes right back and, you become a target. But it's, how do we storytell and how do we compassionately and kindly listen to one another without needing to fix it?
I wonder if that's the next step in the conscious awareness, the raising of consciousness in general, is learning as a whole, learning all to listen to one another, because there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of talking at each other, whether that's at home or on the bigger world scale. And it's not like I'm trying to save the world here, but that whole concept of listening, like, it all starts at home. Even when you're saying like that fixing thing, I mean, I do it all the time with my husband, to the point where sometimes he doesn't want to share his feelings or what's going on, is because it's like it is, like you said, sometimes you just want to talk about it and you're not looking for the solution. You're not looking for someone to fix you. You just need to get the words out and hear it and figure it out. And that's definitely something, I mean, whether it's on an individual level or on a bigger scale, that I think we all need to start to learn to do a little bit more of, is listen.
But of course, we don't know how to listen to each other because we don't know how to listen to ourselves. We silence that inner voice, right? And so when someone says something, like I remember in the beginning of my healing journey, I would say to my husband, "You're triggering me." He's just saying whatever he needs to say. What's already in me that's being triggered by what he's sharing? And then assuming that radical responsibility for what's triggered in here is my responsibility, because I want to be a safe space for him to share whatever he needs to share. Oh, that hurt my feelings. I'm teaching him that he needs to filter instead of coming fully with his stuff, right? So after we have a difficult conversation and I see I'm triggered, I ask for space. Hey, something came up for me. I'll come right back to you, but I need to address this so that I can be a safe space of listening for you. And then I go and I do my own work. Why did that piss me off? Why did I want to get angry with him? He just was sharing he had a tough day at work. Like, looking at what's in here, because what's triggered in me is what I need to spend time healing, So then I don't project my own stuff onto his experience. It's hard.
But it all comes back to going within, kind of how we started the whole conversation. It all comes back to going within. And I don't want to say that will solve everything, because it doesn't solve everything, but it helps. Like, that's how we heal. That's how we really get to know who we are and show up in a way that supports those people we love.
Yeah. And that's also how you get in touch with how you play, what your big dreams in life are. And it's from that place that you too then get to create a life that you love. Like, going within isn't all sitting with your pain and with your shadow and struggling and hurting. That's also where, like, you birth things. That's also where you get back in touch with your passions, with your purpose. Like, I mean, yeah, it's so, to me, going within solves everything. Like, it starts and ends in there. And so when I know who I am, not only am I a great space of love for others around me and for myself, but I get to create a life that is, a deeper and richer experience of what it means to be Marta, of what I'm interested in experiencing here. And it's the pain and the joy and everything in between, and making an impact and changing lives and having deep connections with other humans. It's just so beautiful. Even if the thing that we're talking about is hard, like life is just so much richer for me because of the connections now I'm able to have with others, because I've reconnected with myself, and then my life is still beautiful and extraordinary, because when I believe that I'm a spirit first, there's abundance, like there's limitlessness. And of course, everything that I desire was planted in me for a reason. And so I believe that it can be mine. And I want that for everyone. Like the life that you're dreaming of, go get it. But first you have to clean up some stuff that's blocking you from seeing that you can have it in the first place, blocking you from being able to receive it. Like so often we want it and then it shows up and we're like, no, I wanted it to look this way.
Yeah.
Because we're so closed off to like, this is the box, but it comes and it's just that openness to like, oh, okay, this is the thing I had been manifesting. It just is wearing different clothes than I expected. Yeah. And that's been a lesson for me.
Well, and I even think, like you said, is like that going within doesn't mean you always have to be sitting with the pain. Going within can be connecting to that inner child and play. It doesn't, I think, especially in Western culture, we treat play, imagination, silliness as trivial, but those are such huge parts too. We have to sit with the pain, but we have to play a little bit too. And your imagination, that play, that's what really opens us up to those open possibilities of anything can happen and we can bring anything into our life.
Totally. And then as women, going within, reconnecting to our sensuality, to our femininity, to our sexuality, like we are the birthers, right? Like life comes to the earth through us, through our wombs. Like we are so powerful. And like reconnecting with that, like anytime I do any sort of meditation around that, I just leave so empowered, remembering who I am as a woman. Like I get to create, I bring forth life. My God, that's incredible.
Well, we have to remember that as women, and what I've been having lots of discussions about is, we're ushering in the new era of the divine feminine, which I think is part of that. And even just like, even if you're struggling to think that, it's like, I know my mentors always told me, go put on Beyonce, go listen to Who Runs the World, girls, like put on your high heels and like embrace that feminine aspect of your, like, I'm a bad bee, like I can do this, and reclaiming that essence that we are, because as women, we do birth life. So I love it. And so I know you have retreats. I know you have big events that you do to help women reconnect and help others reconnect. Tell me a little bit how we can get in touch with you if we want to learn and work with you.
Social media is always the thing nowadays. So you can follow me on Instagram at Marta Hobbs, or on Facebook. You can reach out to me through my website. And if you're on the journey and feeling lost or just getting started on, Unraveling, do order the book. I wrote it to be, the first step in terms of, giving assistance and hope to men and women. And the book's available on Amazon. Super proud. It became a bestseller in 24 hours. Took me 3 years to write it. And really, I think most people will see themselves in it. And it's just been a beautiful, beautiful journey for me as an author. Well, and I do events too, and I announce those on Instagram. And lately I do I have a partnership with the Four Seasons Hotel, where I teach a meditation form I've developed in their spas. And lately these beautiful invitations have been coming into my life, where women will come and see me chat or listen to a podcast and say, come and speak to my group. And that is my favorite thing to do, where we get to, I spoke in Tampa to a group of 50 last week. And it's just this beautiful, intimate chat, just like you and I are having, and just making it okay for women to talk about this stuff. It's life-giving for me. And I just love spending time doing stuff like that. I'm so I really do feel so blessed. And then it gives purpose to my suffering. And so it heals me at the same time.
Isn't that true? When we heal ourselves, we heal others. It sounds selfish, but it's not. And even like reading your book or whatever, speaking and connecting in that way, we all find a little bit of ourselves in someone else's story. It's just the way it is. We can come from completely different walks of life, but we are going to connect on that level in some way, shape, or form with something someone is sharing. So man or woman. So I love that you share your story. I love that you're speaking, and I'm really appreciative that you took your time out today to have this conversation with me. You've had such an amazing journey, and you've given me some great advice, and the listeners as well.
Thank you. And really thank you for the invitation. And thanks for creating this beautiful space to be able to have this conversation. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Bye. And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Myers. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Marta Hobbs, for joining me in such a beautiful conversation all about love, finding that love for ourselves by turning within and truly embracing who we are on an authentic level so that we can live a life we truly love. I'll put all the information of how to get in touch with Marta in the show notes below. Also, how to order her book or attend any of her events. As always, you can find Intentional Media and Intentional Living with Courtney Myers at CourtneyMyers.com, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.